There is a plant so delicious, so valuable, and so dangerous to grow that in some parts of the world, picking it can land you in jail. Right now, I'm Adam Grove from Backyard Crops, and I'm about to tell you the story of a vegetable that was so loved by kings and presidents that they nearly destroyed it completely. And here's the crazy part. You can grow this plant yourself, and it might be the smartest thing you ever put in your garden. Before I dive into this wild story, if you're interested in growing foods that actually matter, foods with history and real nutrition, then hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We're uncovering the forgotten crops that the food industry tried to bury. And if you're already a Backyard Crops fan, drop a like right now to help this video reach more people who need to hear this. Let me set the scene. Picture the beaches of England during the 1800s. Night after night, under the cover of darkness, groups of poachers would rush onto the coastlines with carts and wagons. They weren't stealing gold or treasure, they were stealing a vegetable. They were so desperate to harvest this plant that they would dig up massive root systems that had been growing for decades, sometimes working through entire nights to strip entire beaches clean. The devastation became so severe that the British government had to step in. Today, under the Wildlife and Countryside Act of 1981, this plant, Sea Kale, scientifically known as Crambe maritima, is a protected species throughout its native range. You can actually face legal consequences for harvesting it in the wild. But here's what makes this even more interesting. This legal protection isn't there because the plant is poisonous. It's not there because it's invasive or dangerous to ecosystems. The government had to protect sea kale because humans loved it so much that we nearly ate it into complete extinction. We had to criminalize its harvest to save the species from disappearing forever. To understand how valuable this plant really is, we need to look at history. Specifically, we need to look at the gardens of Thomas Jefferson at Monticello in Virginia. In 1809, Jefferson didn't just plant sea kale casually among his other vegetables. He treated it like a prize. He recorded every detail of its growth and development. He used special blanching techniques, methods that mimicked the difficult conditions of wild coastal areas to create the perfect crop. Jefferson considered sea kale one of the finest vegetables that any garden could possibly produce. For someone like Thomas Jefferson, a man obsessed with agriculture and experimentation, that statement means everything. But Jefferson wasn't alone in his admiration. Across the Atlantic, in Great Britain during the Regency era, sea kale had become the ultimate status symbol. The demand didn't start with ordinary people. It started with the Prince Regent himself, who later became King George IV. He served sea kale at his lavish banquets at the Royal Pavilion in Brighton. Once the king was eating it at his royal table, the entire British ruling class felt they had to have it too. The demand became absolutely insatiable. At London's Covent Garden Market, bundles of blanched sea kale shoots were selling for prices that rivaled imported exotic fruits from distant colonies. We're talking about a vegetable that cost more than fruit shipped across oceans. That's how valuable it had become. Here's where the story takes a dramatic turn. Sea kale grows wild on the shingle beaches of the southern English coast. It was just sitting there, free for anyone to take. Local farmers and entrepreneurs started establishing kale yards, cultivated areas where they could grow it legally and sell it to the markets. But they couldn't grow it fast enough. The demand from London's wealthy elite was simply too great. So the locals did what any enterprising person might do. They turned to the wild. Under the cover of darkness, poachers didn't just come to pick a few stems. They came with serious equipment. They brought carts and wagons right onto the sand, and they dug up the massive ancient root crowns, the thick underground systems that had survived on those beaches for decades, sometimes for a century or more. In a single night, entire coastlines would be stripped bare. All those roots would be loaded onto wagons and transported to London to be sold at market. It was a vegetable gold rush, pure and simple. The ecological devastation was so complete that it threatened the survival of the entire species in the wild. This is why the British government eventually had to step in. Without legal protection, sea kale would have been completely eradicated from its native habitat. The plant that graced the tables of kings and founding fathers was nearly destroyed by human greed and demand. Now, you might be wondering, what exactly makes this plant worth risking a criminal record for? Why did people risk arrest and prosecution just to dig it up? The answer lies deep in the plant's biology, in how it survives in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Sea kale is a halophyte. That's a fancy scientific term for a plant that doesn't just tolerate salty environments, it actually thrives in them. Most of our modern crops, corn, wheat, soy, lettuce, and rice, are glycophytes. They are adapted to normal, low-salt conditions. If you water a tomato plant with salt water, its cells will collapse and it will die immediately. The salt concentration is simply too high for the plant to survive. But sea kale is different. During its evolution, it developed a massive, fleshy taproot system that dives deep into the sand. This root system does something remarkable. It mines for fresh water in underground layers while the surface of the beach is constantly bombarded with salt spray and salty soil. Because sea kale lives in a constant state of salt stress, the plant developed survival mechanisms that are extraordinary. It creates potent antioxidant compounds to protect its own cells from the salt damage. When you eat sea kale, you're consuming the protection that the plant developed to survive in hostile conditions. You're getting the benefit of millions of years of evolution in a coastal environment. Let me give you the hard numbers, because numbers don't lie. The modern orange is marketed everywhere as the ultimate source of vitamin C. A standard commercial orange that you buy at the grocery store delivers roughly 53 milligrams of vitamin C per 100 grams of fruit. That's what we've been told is the gold standard of vitamin C content. Sea kale shoots absolutely obliterate that number. Analysis shows that sea kale contains approximately 130 milligrams of vitamin C per 100 grams. That's nearly 2.5 times the vitamin C content of an orange. Think about that for a moment. You could eat half a portion of sea kale and get more vitamin C than a whole orange. But here's what's even more important from a historical perspective. Sea kale is ready to harvest in late winter and early spring. That's exactly when humans historically needed immune support the most. Before modern agriculture, before we could ship tropical fruits around the world, sea kale was growing wild on the coast, ready to be harvested at the precise moment when our ancestors' immune systems needed the most help. But the nutritional story doesn't stop with vitamin C. Sea kale is a brassica, a close cousin of broccoli and kale. It's loaded with compounds called glucosinolates, and specifically with a molecule called glucoraphanin. When you chew or cook sea kale, an enzyme reaction converts glucoraphanin into sulforaphane, a powerhouse molecule that has been extensively studied by scientists for its ability to seek out and destroy cancer cells. Standard commercial broccoli contains an average of 50 to 60 milligrams of glucosinolates per 100 grams. But remember, modern broccoli is grown with heavy irrigation and fertilizers designed for rapid growth. This actually dilutes the concentration of these protective compounds. Sea kale, forged by the constant stress of the coastal environment, packs a much heavier punch. Concentrations often exceed 100 milligrams per 100 grams. We're talking about double the defensive capability of the standard grocery store broccoli option. And as a bonus, it carries a flavor profile of hazelnut and cream. This isn't just nutritious, it's actually delicious. So here's the question that should be bothering you. If sea kale is superior in nutrition, superior in flavor, and rich in history, why did it completely disappear from American and British gardens? Why are we eating flavorless, watery supermarket asparagus instead? Why did the most prized vegetable of kings become completely forgotten? The answer reveals something important about how our food system actually works. The villain in this story isn't bad luck or disease. It's a concept called forcing, and it explains how we traded real nutrition for industrial convenience. In the wild, sea kale is naturally blanched by the shifting sands of the beach. When spring arrives, the wind blows sand over the emerging crowns and shoots. This sand blocks the sunlight completely. The plant pushes up through this darkness, but because it cannot photosynthesize without light, something remarkable happens. The stalks remain pearly white, incredibly tender, and naturally sweet. If the sun hits the shoots, everything changes. They turn green, they become tough, and they develop a bitter taste. The flavor and texture that made sea kale so valuable is completely dependent on darkness. That's the key to understanding why it disappeared. To replicate this natural blanching in a garden setting, Victorian gardeners and early American farmers developed elaborate terracotta vessels called sea kale pots. These were heavy clay domes, carefully designed to cover each individual plant in early spring. The gardener would place these pots over every single plant to block the sunlight and create the darkness needed for perfect crops. It was a labor of love. It was beautiful. It worked perfectly. But to the industrial food system that emerged and took over in the 20th century, this was an absolute logistical nightmare. You cannot automate the placement of 10,000 clay pots across a field. You cannot drive a combine harvester through a field filled with ceramic domes. You cannot process 10,000 individually covered plants through a mechanized system. The modern agricultural model is built on the foundation of uniformity and speed. It's built on the ability to plant thousands of identical plants, grow them all the same way, harvest them all at once, and move them through a processing system as quickly as possible. A vegetable that demands to be individually tucked in and hidden from the sun is a vegetable that costs far too much in labor hours to be profitable at industrial scale. Sea kale was abandoned not because it failed as a crop, it was abandoned because it was deemed inefficient. We sacrificed the quality, the nutrition, and the flavor of the crop for the speed of the harvest. We chose convenience over excellence. But there's a second reason sea kale disappeared, and it's equally important. Once you cut that white, crisp shoot, a chemical countdown begins immediately. Within hours, the sugars in the plant begin to convert to starch. Within a few days, the crispness fades and the vegetable becomes rubbery and tough. The modern global supply chain is built entirely around something called the cold chain. The whole system depends on the ability to pick a vegetable in one place, gas it with preservative chemicals, cool it, and truck it across the country over weeks without it deteriorating. Sea kale refuses to participate in this system. It bruises easily, it loses flavor rapidly, it looks messy when packaged in plastic because it's an honest vegetable that cannot hide its age or condition. Because sea kale could not survive the truck ride across the country, because it couldn't sit in a supermarket display case for weeks looking perfect, grocery stores decided it wasn't worth selling. The economics of the system didn't work. Sea kale was eliminated from commerce not because consumers didn't want it, but because the infrastructure of modern food distribution couldn't handle it. Here's where the story gets exciting. What makes sea kale a complete failure for the industrial food system makes it an absolute miracle for you, the home gardener. What the food industry considers a liability is actually a superpower for anyone willing to grow their own food. First, sea kale is a perennial plant. Unlike the annual vegetables that you have to replant every single spring, tomatoes, peppers, lettuce, beans, you plant sea kale once and it will produce food for 20 years. It's a faithful provider that keeps giving year after year without replanting. Second, it's one of the most visually beautiful plants you can grow. It produces massive, wavy, blue-green leaves that look like living coral. In summer, the entire plant erupts into clouds of honey-scented white flowers that attract pollinators from miles around. It's an edible ornamental that fits as naturally in a flower border as it does in a vegetable patch. This is practical beauty, a plant that feeds you while also transforming your garden aesthetically. For anyone interested in permaculture design, sea kale is a powerful tool. Its deep taproots stabilize sandy, loose soils where other plants completely fail. If you live in a coastal area or even just have poor sandy soil where your tomatoes struggle to grow, sea kale will thrive. It's naturally drought-tolerant once established, which means you're not spending water to grow it.
Here's something most people don't realize. Sea kale gives you multiple harvests throughout the year. It's like having 3 different vegetables from a single plant that lives for decades. In the spring, you harvest the blanched shoots, those pearly white, tender, hazelnut-flavored treasures that made sea kale famous. In the summer, the younger green leaves can be cooked exactly like kale or collards. You get that hearty green vegetable harvest. In late summer, the broccoli-like florets appear and become edible. You get a third harvest of flower buds with a completely different texture and flavor. 1 plant, 3 different vegetables, decades of production. This is the opposite of the industrial model. This is abundance through diversity, not monoculture. This is resilience. We have spent the last century fighting nature. We've been trying to force massive monocultures of thirsty, weak crops into environments where they don't naturally belong. We've been pumping water, spraying chemicals, and burning fuel to grow plants that are fundamentally unsuited to where we're trying to grow them. Sea kale offers a completely different path. It invites us to stop fighting and start eating what the earth actually wants to grow. It's an invitation to work with nature instead of against it. It's an invitation to grow food that's adapted to your local conditions instead of trying to adapt your conditions to the food industry's preferences. By planting sea kale in your garden, you're connecting with a lineage that stretches from the historic gardens of Monticello, where Thomas Jefferson tended his prized specimens, all the way back to the wild edges of the world where this plant still grows on untamed coastlines. You're reclaiming a flavor that was deemed too difficult for the modern world to handle. You're saying no to the industrial food system and yes to real food. Now I'm going to give you a practical word of warning. You won't find sea kale seeds at big box stores. You won't find them at Home Depot or most commercial seed companies. They don't carry it because there's no industrial demand. But that's actually good news for you. It means you're accessing something real, something that wasn't created for profit margins. To get sea kale seeds, you'll need to seek out specialized heirloom seed providers. These are companies dedicated to preserving plant varieties that the mainstream food system abandoned. Once you have your seeds, the growing process is actually simpler than you might think. Sea kale is a halophyte that loves salt, but you do not need to salt your garden to grow it successfully. What it actually demands is excellent drainage. The plant developed its salt tolerance because it grows in sandy, well-drained coastal environments. So the key to growing sea kale is replicating that drainage. Give it sand, give it sun, and it will give you a lifetime of food. Find a sandy spot in your garden, order some seeds from a specialized provider, plant the vegetable that was once too dangerous to pick. You'll be growing one of the most historically significant, nutritionally powerful, and genuinely beautiful food plants on Earth. If you want to fill your garden with foods that tell a story, with crops that have genuine history and real nutrition, if you're ready to grow the plants that the food industry tried to erase, then I want you to do something right now. Give this video a like. Hit the subscribe button for backyard crops. Share this video with someone who cares about growing real food. We have more forgotten harvests to uncover. We have more stories of plants that history values more than money. The best way to fight the industrial food system is to grow your own. The best way to reclaim your food freedom is to plant something with real value. Come join us. We're digging up the past to feed the future. And the next time you're walking through a grocery store looking at those sad, watery vegetables, remember, you have a choice. You can grow better. See you in the garden.